Hi, I'm Kate from Sewing to Overlocking, and I don't know about you, but Christmas has once again snuck up on me, and I'm in December and I'm madly doing that panic of getting everything finished. And today I'm actually putting together some napkins for Christmas Day, and this is from the Nancy Zeman book, Serge with Confidence. So really fantastic projects in this book if you can get your hands on it. But it's basically two circles of fabric that you put back to back. You do a beautiful decorative edge and then you fold them so that they look like a Christmas tree. And I really love the way these look. Now in the book I think it's 18 inches you cut them to, which is what I've done in the past, but I've been using the Husqvarna Amber Air, and it's a combination overlocker cover stitch machine and air threading, all of that, amazing. But it has this extension table, and that's what I'm going to do today to cheat. I don't even have to cut a circle. I've actually just cut squares to the size that I need. Now I'm not going to get 18 inches just because of the size that I can stitch here. So I've cut these squares at I think about 17 inches, and it's going to stitch just a little bit narrower than that. So you'll know if you've done Learning to Love Your Overlocker with me. If you do have to cut into your circle while you're sewing, you don't just jump on and start to cut and go all the way around, because when you get back it's not going to be even. So what I've done here is I've cut a little section out which will sit up against the blade, which will be my perfect starting point, and then as I stitch I'm going to trim all the way around. The most important thing when you're doing anything decorative is the stitch that you select and the thread that you're working with. So I like a 3-thread wide narrow or narrow hem when I'm doing something like this. You could use a rolled hem. The only problem is when you're looking at the folded edge, you'll be looking at the underside of the stitch. So a rolled hem has a definite right and wrong side. So I quite like, and this is a narrow overlock, or you could use a narrow hem because then your tensions are still balanced on the side. So I've set up for a narrow overlock, which is my right needle only, and I have my decorative thread in the loopers. So Wonderful Glamour, love Wonderful thread. So I have red in the lower looper, which is going to coordinate beautifully with my fabric I have underneath there because it's got little red berries on it. And I have the green Glamour thread in the upper looper. Green polyester thread in the needle to match with the upper looper thread. And of course, you could use any other sort of decorative thread. So if you just want something to fill the gaps in nicely, then soft lock's ideal. So that's a woolly poly. It just creates a bit of bulk, but still keeps the edge of your work really soft. You could use Razzle or Dazzle, which is more like a perlate weight. It's a much thicker thread. Or Spaghetti's beautiful, that is a 12 weight, and mine's fallen on the floor of course, but that's a 12 weight thread that works beautifully in every overlocker that I've ever tried it with. So have a play, have a look at the Wonderful website to see some of their beautiful threads. Today we're going with a bit of sparkle and we're going to use some glamour. So I'll move the camera closer so you can see my stitching. So ideally when we're starting to stitch, I always try and start more on the straight grain rather than starting on a bias, because you know when you've got a circle, you've got areas of straight grain which have no stretch and areas of bias which have stretch, because I'm using 100% cotton fabric. This is actually the Liberty Christmas range. And so when we get to the area of the stretch or the bias, what can happen is you get a fluted edge. So, and I don't want my corners to be fluting. So this is where we use the differential feed to increase around this section to combat that stretch happening. But starting on the straight edge, I don't have to worry about adjusting my feed to start with. So I'm just going to place my presser foot down and start to stitch. And as always, when you're sewing a circle, it's really important that I keep my hand sort of over to the left here to help with feeding and twisting, but also keeping the fabric in front of the foot so that it doesn't run away while you're sewing. So as I'm coming into the bias now, I can feel it sort of starting to stretch a little bit. I'm just going to increase my differential feed slightly. So normally on most machines, you'd probably be stitching on a differential of 1 or N to start with on your straight grain. When you get to your bias edge, you might take it up to 1.25 or 1.3, 1.5 if it's a really stretchy fabric, but always do a bit of a test and see how you go before you start. And then I'm coming back around to my straight grain, so I'm going to drop my diff back to the standard on this machine. My bias is approaching again, so I'm just going to up that again. And back on the straight grain, so I'm going to drop it back down. Up to the bias again. If you're concerned about where the bias starts and finishes, you can always mark it with a quilter's clip if that helps you to keep track of what you're working with. Back to my straight grain. I'm going to up again because we're hitting the last stretch of the bias. And then coming back around to my straight grain. That little noise that you're hearing as I make the adjustments and changes, it's actually just the machine calibrating and resetting itself because I'm changing settings as I go. And that's because everything's built in with this machine. So when I've come back to where I've started, I've just trimmed the last of my fabric. I'm just going to do a couple of stitches over the top, just to make sure I've connected and finished. And then I'm going to remove the pin from here. Obviously, if you're just sewing a circle and you don't have it connected, you don't have to worry about that step. And then I'm going to raise the presser foot and turn my work slightly to the back. Place the foot back down, and then you simply just chain out. And that's a really clean way of finishing your work and to make it less obvious at your start and finish point. So that chain, you can then, if I'd made it a bit longer, I could have used a hand needle to pull it back through underneath, or you can just use a little bit of fray stop, let it dry, and then cut it off. So there's my perfect circle. Gosh, this is so easy. I'm going to give it a little press, so we'll move over to the iron. So I'm giving my circle a nice press. What I love about this is using the differential feed on those curves. The bias is sitting beautifully flat, so that's no issue whatsoever. I'm going to fold the top of this down. No, I guess it's about 1/3 of the way. I'm going to give it a nice little press along that edge. And then it's a matter of doing your fold to bring the tree to life. So you can just sort of roll it around really, like so. And give that edge a press. And there's my tree all done. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and some of the hints and tips about circular sewing might benefit you with what you're doing in your sewing room. So until I see you next time, don't forget to follow my socials, which is Sew Into Overlocking on Facebook and Instagram. My website is sewintoOverlocking.com. And until I see you in the classroom or online, stay safe and well, and happy overlocking.